He came into MMA with a chain around his neck and violence in his eyes. A walking weapon from Memphis with slams that shook the cage and knockouts that echoed through arenas. Quinton "Rampage" Jackson wasn't just a fighter, he was a spectacle. He howled before fights and left legends broken after them. From the blood-soaked rings of Pride to the bright lights of the UFC, Rampage was chaos with fists. But somewhere along the way, the roar went quiet, the fights got slower, the violence faded, and the man who once seemed unstoppable became almost invisible. What happened to one of MMA's most electrifying stars? Was it the fame? The money? The wear of war? This is the story of Rampage Jackson, the brawler, the beast, the legend who rose through brutality and slowly disappeared behind the silence. Before the slams, before the howls, before the headlines, there was just a kid from Memphis. Quinton Jackson wasn't born into fame or fortune. He was born into chaos. Raised in a rough neighborhood where fists were louder than words, where every day was survival, not success. In a city known more for music than MMA, Jackson's early life didn't resemble a fighter's fairy tale. It resembled a war zone. His father walked out when he was 10, just vanished. Left behind a house of resentment and confusion. Jackson didn't grow up with structure. He grew up with street fights, scraped knuckles, and nights full of noise. Violence wasn't a choice. It was the language of his environment. If you wanted to survive in Memphis, you didn't talk tough. You fought. And Quinton fought, often. Sometimes for fun, sometimes for pride. But more often because someone gave him a reason. He was a raw, wild brawler before he ever stepped on a mat. And yet, through all the chaos, there was something under the surface. Not just rage, but potential. A buried gift for combat. But no one saw it. Not then. Not in that neighborhood. It wasn't until high school that someone finally pointed him toward a wrestling room. A coach saw the wild energy, the physicality, the explosiveness, and thought maybe it could be channeled. And just like that, a different kind of fight entered Quinton's life. Wrestling gave him rules, structure, pain with purpose. And Quinton took to it fast. The aggression he used in the streets, it translated. He wasn't polished, but he was powerful. And more importantly, he liked it. For the first time, fighting didn't feel like survival. It felt like control. But even as his talent grew, life didn't get easier. He still bounced between houses, still got into trouble. His grades weren't perfect. His environment was still pulling at his ankles. But wrestling, that was the lifeline. He stuck with it. After high school, he earned a chance to wrestle at community college. The dream wasn't clear, but the path was beginning. Then came his first exposure to MMA. He saw a VHS tape of UFC. No rules, no gloves, just chaos. And for someone raised in chaos, it felt familiar, it felt honest. The kind of fight where everything was allowed and nothing was fake. The kind of fight he understood. From that moment, Quinton Jackson didn't just want to wrestle, he wanted to fight. For real, with fists, with elbows, with violence. And soon, Japan would give him that chance. In the early 2000s, Quinton Jackson left America and stepped into the heart of combat sports chaos. Japan's Pride Fighting Championships, a no-holds-barred battleground where the rules were brutal, the crowd respectful, and the legends unforgiving. Pride wasn't the UFC. It was wilder, bloodier, bigger. Head stomps were legal, soccer kicks were welcomed, and every fight felt like a gladiator match. For Jackson, it wasn't just opportunity, it was destiny. But he was broke, unknown. He didn't speak the language. His first few contracts barely covered food. He slept on gym mats, traveled alone, and showed up to fights with nothing but heart and hands. But that didn't matter, because Japan didn't care about hype. They cared about spirit, and Jackson had that in spades. His nickname, Rampage, wasn't a gimmick. It was who he became. The slams, the howls, the ferocity, it all clicked in Japan. He wore a heavy steel chain around his neck to the ring. He growled. He stared through opponents like they owed him something, and once the fight started, he turned into a storm. What made Rampage special wasn't just his power. It was his personality. He wasn't another stoic martial artist. He was loud, hilarious, raw. He'd make the crowd laugh in interviews, then make them gasp in fights. He was entertainment and destruction in the same body. His first breakout moment came when he slammed Ricardo Arona unconscious. A full-power, high-arc powerbomb that is still one of the most brutal highlights in MMA history. That one slam turned heads across the world. Suddenly, Rampage wasn't just that wild American. He was a problem, a real one. Pride fed him killers. Igor Vovchanchin, a tank with fists. Kevin Kevin Randleman, a genetic freak, Murilo Bustamante, Minowa, Sakuraba, the list went on. And Rampage, win or lose, never backed down. His record was uneven, his performances were not. He was always fighting legends, and often putting them down. But beyond the fights, something deeper was happening. In Japan, Rampage became himself. He was respected, embraced. Crowds chanted his name. His howls echoed in sold-out arenas. He was poor, but he was proud. He belonged, not just as a fighter, but as a character. A man who could carry chaos with charisma. Still, the cost was steep. The travel, the weight cuts, the endless wars. And eventually, pride fed him to Wanderlei Silva. And that changed everything. There are rivalries in MMA, and then there are blood feuds. Rampage versus Wanderlei Silva wasn't just a clash of styles, it was a clash of worlds. Brazil versus America, controlled violence versus street rage. Both men were forged in chaos, but Silva fought with cold brutality. Rampage fought with emotion. And when they met in 2003 under Pride's blinding lights, it was war. The fight started with energy and ended with trauma. Rampage came out fast, landed heavy shots, slammed Silva to the mat, but Wanderlei was patient, calculated, and vicious. He absorbed the storm, then returned fire with knees. So many knees. Clinch, hold, knee, over and over. By the second round, Rampage's body was bloodied, his face broken. And when the final knee landed, Rampage collapsed, face first into the ropes. That image, him falling, limp, blood pouring, is one of the most haunting moments in MMA history. But he didn't quit. A year later, they did it again. Same result, only faster. Silva finished Rampage again, this time with even less mercy. The rivalry wasn't just lopsided, it was traumatic. Rampage later admitted, "After those fights, I wasn't the same." But the Pride schedule didn't slow down. After Wanderlei came Shogun Rua, another Brazilian assassin. Rampage was exhausted, overworked, and mentally scattered. He went in with injuries, fought anyway. Shogun picked him apart, kicked his legs out, broke his ribs, smashed him into submission. At this point, Rampage's record didn't scream greatness, but his fights did. Every time he walked into that ring, it was war. No safe fights, no padding, just killers. And through it all, fans loved him more. He wasn't perfect. He was real. He didn't hide pain. He didn't fake smiles. He wore his wars like armor. And then, the Pride lights began to fade. The company collapsed under financial pressure and shady deals. Fighters scrambled. Contracts got lost in translation. But across the ocean, a new home was rising, the UFC, and they were waiting for Rampage. By the mid-2000s, Pride was collapsing. Financial scandal, Yakuza ties, and poor management had burned the empire to the ground. Fighters were fleeing, and the UFC, hungry, growing, and strategic, saw a golden opportunity. They didn't just want Pride's talent, they wanted its chaos, its violence, its mystique. And at the top of that wish list, Rampage Jackson. He debuted in the UFC in 2007, and within seconds, fans knew he wasn't built like the others. He was loud, confident, and aggressive. He fought with swagger and swung like a street brawler wearing 4-ounce gloves. His first UFC fight? Marvin Eastman, a former opponent from years prior. This time, Rampage obliterated him. Clean, precise, brutal. Knockout win. Statement made. But that wasn't the real test. His second fight in the UFC was the one that changed everything. Chuck Liddell. At that time, Chuck was the face of the UFC. Iceman. Knockout king, mainstream star. He was on magazine covers, late-night TV, commercials, the man Dana White built a brand around. And Rampage? He had already beaten Chuck once in Pride. But now it was the UFC's house. The UFC thought it would be a war. It was a massacre. In under 2 minutes, Rampage clipped Chuck with a right hook that shut the lights off. The arena exploded, the Iceman melted, and Rampage Jackson, in his second UFC fight, became the UFC light heavyweight champion. Just like that. The chain, the howl, the violence. It was all real. America hadn't seen someone like Rampage before. He wasn't a clean-cut company man. He was raw, unfiltered, explosive, and fans loved it. But Rampage didn't just win the belt. He unified it. His next fight was against Dan Henderson, the last Pride champion. In a 5-round war, Rampage showed he wasn't just power. He had cardio, control, and patience. He outpointed Henderson, earned the decision, and officially unified the UFC and Pride titles. He was at the top of the mountain. Pay-per-views were climbing. Interviews were electric. The belt was his. But the pressure? That was new. Because being the champ isn't just about fighting, it's about defending, touring, selling, performing. And deep down, Rampage was still that Memphis brawler, still the street kid who fought because he had to, not because he wanted to entertain. And slowly, the weight of the crown started to show. Being UFC champion comes with glory, but it also comes with distractions. And for Rampage Jackson, distraction became a lifestyle. After unifying the titles, he was no longer just a fighter, he was a celebrity. Magazine shoots, talk shows, fans lining up for autographs. The chain around his neck became a brand. The howl, a meme. His name, a moneymaker. Then Hollywood came calling. In 2010, Rampage starred in the A-Team reboot as B.A. Baracus, the iconic role made famous by Mr. T. It was his big break. Red carpets, movie premieres, cameras in his face. Rampage wasn't just fighting for fans now, he was fighting for box office receipts. And that's where the cracks began. While filming the movie, he juggled fight camps and scripts. His focus? Split. His diet? Slipping. His training? Inconsistent. And it showed. He returned to the cage against Forrest Griffin, a tough, awkward brawler with grit and cardio. Rampage looked sluggish, missed big shots, struggled with pace. The fight went to decision, and the judges gave it to Forrest. Just like that, the belt was gone. Rampage claimed he won. Fans debated, but beneath the controversy was a harder truth. He wasn't the same. The sharpness had dulled, the hunger had faded, and more importantly, his priorities had shifted. Hollywood gave him money, freedom, attention. Fighting gave him pressure, weight cuts, expectations. Which one would you choose? He stayed active, facing top contenders, headlining cards. But something was always missing. In his prime, Rampage fought like every punch had a purpose. Now, he was fighting like he was trying to win, but not kill. His coaches saw it. His opponents noticed it. Even his fans felt it. The man who once slammed Ricardo Arona unconscious now avoided grappling entirely. His slams? Gone. His howls? Quieter, his fists slower. He wasn't washed, but he was drifting, and the lifestyle didn't help. Rampage had always been wild, unfiltered, but now the headlines weren't about knockouts. They were about controversy, questionable interviews, run-ins with the law, a bizarre 2012 incident where he led police on a high-speed chase in a monster truck. Yes, really, only added to the chaos. He apologized, said he wasn't himself, blamed stress, blamed diet pills. But the truth was simpler. Fame had pulled Rampage away from the fighter he used to be, and the deeper he leaned into entertainment, the further he drifted from destruction. There's a moment in every fighter's career when the highlight reels slow down, the punches stop landing, the violence fades, and what's left is the grind, the rounds, the decisions, the survival. For Rampage Jackson, that moment came fast, and it stayed. From 2009 onward, his career entered a strange, uncomfortable middle phase. He was still a star, still a draw, still powerful. But the fights weren't fireworks anymore. They were decisions. Long, grueling, often frustrating decisions. Fans started to notice. Rampage wasn't slamming anyone. He wasn't going to the ground. He'd box, jab, wait, hope for a knockout. And if it didn't come, he'd lose on points. The wild man from Pride had turned into a strategic striker with fading urgency. He fought Rashad Evans in a heavily hyped grudge match and got outworked. He fought Lyoto Machida and won by split decision in a bout many thought he lost. Then came John Jones, the young phenom. Rampage looked slow, flat-footed. He tried to pressure, but Jones picked him apart. Jabbed, kicked, spun, and finally submitted him, the first time Rampage had been submitted in the UFC. After the fight, Rampage admitted something telling. "I used to fight for pride. Now, I fight for money." And the audience felt it. It wasn't just that he was aging, it was that the fire, the reason why he fought, had changed. He no longer seemed to enjoy the chaos. He no longer howled after wins. He no longer hunted knockouts. He fought because he had to fulfill contracts, to collect checks. The slams were gone. The wild hooks? Rare. The howling? Muted. But the expectations stayed. Fans still expected the Rampage of 2004. They still wanted blood. And when they got 3-round sparring matches instead, the disappointment grew louder. Critics called him lazy, said he was phoning it in. But behind the scenes, Rampage was dealing with injuries. Real ones. Torn ligaments, worn knees, back issues. He'd been fighting since his early 20s. His body was exhausted. His joints were worn down from years of Pride's madness. But instead of healing, he pushed on, fight after fight, decision after decision. Not because he loved it, because he had to, because he didn't know how to stop, because even legends forget how to leave. By the time Rampage Jackson signed with Bellator in 2013, the writing was already on the wall. His UFC contract had ended with frustration. He was done with Dana White, done with judges, done with critics. He felt disrespected, underpaid, overlooked, and he needed a fresh start, or at least a different paycheck. Bellator offered both. They promised him star treatment, custom walkouts, less media, more freedom, more money, and most importantly, a return to being the guy. Not just a fighter, but the main event. Rampage liked that. He made his Bellator debut against Joey Beltran, and it looked, for a moment, like the old beast had returned. Big punches, snarling aggression, knockout win in the first round. The fans roared. Rampage howled. Was this a comeback? A resurrection? Next came Christian Mapumbu, a former champ. Rampage won again. Then King Mo Lawal, a decorated wrestler. Rampage edged a decision. 3 straight wins. Bellator was thrilled. Fans were cautiously optimistic. And Quinton? He started smiling again. He wasn't slamming opponents, but he was winning. He was still a draw, still entertaining. He did press conferences with sunglasses and wisecracks. He poked fun at fighters, claimed he wanted to take the Bellator title, even teased a return to the UFC. But here's what wasn't being said. The fights weren't exciting. Rampage wasn't throwing combinations. He wasn't checking kicks. He wasn't even cutting weight like before. Now fighting at heavyweight, sometimes above 250 pounds. The fights were slow, safe, punches in single digits, clinches, shrugs, decision wins. And behind the wins was a man still running on fumes. He was carrying injuries. His knees were shot. His cardio was fading. His power, while still dangerous, wasn't the weapon it once was. The killer instinct? Long gone. He'd land one punch, smile at the crowd, then coast. But Bellator didn't care. They weren't building stars. They were buying names. Rampage was a name, a past, a brand. So they kept giving him fights. He rematched King Mo, lost this time. Fought Chael Sonnen, another safe fight, another decision, another forgettable night. And yet, the myth still lingered. Every time Rampage walked into an arena with his chain, his snarl, his walkout music, fans wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, one last slam was coming, one last roar. But what they didn't know was that Rampage wasn't trying to make a comeback. He was trying to cash one last check. December 29th, 2019, Saitama, Japan. The arena was familiar. The crowd, respectful, quiet, and reverent. The stage, Bellator vs. Risen, a special co-promotion event meant to honor the legends of MMA. And in the main event, 2 ghosts from a bygone era. Rampage Jackson versus Fedor Emelianenko. In 2003, this would have been a dream matchup. 2 icons, 2 finishers, 2 monsters. In 2019, it felt more like a memorial. Rampage walked into the ring at 265 pounds, the heaviest of his career. Bloated, slow, flat-footed. His belly jiggled with every step. The snarling animal from Pride had become a tired heavyweight, carrying the weight of years and years of weight. Fedor looked calm, focused, still had the bounce. The killers, calm. The bell rang. Rampage moved forward, but it was sluggish. His hands were low, his stance stiff. He threw lazy jabs, hoped to land a lucky bomb. But Fedor was sharp. He circled, read the timing, waited, and then struck. A clean right hand landed on Rampage's jaw. He dropped like a tree in slow motion, crashing to the mat, lifeless. The ref jumped in. The fight was over. In under 3 minutes, Rampage tried to sit up, shook his head, embarrassed. The crowd clapped politely. He stood, faked a smile. But you could see it, the humiliation, the realization. He wasn't a fighter anymore. He was a name, a relic. In the post-fight interview, Rampage didn't make excuses. He didn't yell. He didn't howl. He just said, "I felt like I was in good shape, but I just didn't want to be there." And that hit harder than the punch, because it wasn't about cardio or strategy or age. It was about spirit. The fire was gone, not dimmed, gone. After the fight, he quietly vanished. No press tour, no retirement speech, no comeback announcement. The MMA world moved on. The headlines faded. The fans turned their attention to newer names, newer knockouts. Rampage? He went home. No belts, no closure, just silence. The last time Rampage Jackson fought was in 2019. Since then, silence. No official retirement, no fight announcements, just the quiet absence of a man who once shook arenas with every slam, every howl, every punch that left opponents broken on the canvas. Where did he go? Las Vegas, mostly. Sometimes California. Sometimes nowhere at all. He still posts on Instagram, jokes, memes, nostalgia clips. Every once in a while, he shares old highlights, a reminder of who he used to be. He's a father now, a car guy, a gamer. He still makes fans laugh, still carries that same charm. But that fighter, the one who slammed Arona into the earth, who knocked out Chuck, who growled through blood in pride, he's not coming back. And that's what makes Rampage different from other legends. He didn't beg for one last run. He didn't cling to relevance. He didn't build a gym or become a coach or beg for influencer bouts. He just faded. No media circuit, no podcast, no coaching team, no fight IQ breakdowns on YouTube, nothing. He never wanted to be a mentor, never wanted to be a company man, never chased legacy. He chased chaos. And when that chaos left him, so did the reason to fight. Ask fans today what they remember about Rampage Jackson, and they'll say the chain, the howl, the slam, the smile, the violence. But they'll also pause, because there's something unfinished about his story. No final fight, no final moment, just a slow fade into memory. And maybe that's the most honest ending of all. Not every warrior gets a curtain call. Some just walk out of the cage one last time and never come back. He didn't go out on his shield. He went out on his feet, quietly. Because Quinton Rampage Jackson didn't fight to be remembered. He fought because it was the only way he knew how to feel alive. And when that feeling left, so did he.